little bit better because we did talk a lot, and we talked about stuff that's really important and very impactful. Things we value, things that we've lost. It's so hard to lose things, and that is probably the worst suffering that we can have in this world, is to lose something that we love, or someone especially that we love. And it makes it really hard. It makes it really difficult to trust God during those moments when we do lose something. And it sometimes makes us question, if God really is loving, and He loves us so much, and He can do anything that is within His power to do, why would He allow stuff like this to happen? And that's hard to work through. It's really difficult, and the answers to those questions aren't short. They're pretty long. And God still asks us to trust Him. Even though we live in a world that's full of evil, a world that turned into something that He didn't want to, but because He gave us the free will, that's what it turned into. We chose to do evil. Today we discussed grief in class, and it went really well. I'm so glad for all of you that came, and also all of you that spoke about your own grief and your own loss. It was very encouraging to me. If it wasn't encouraging to y'all, know that you encouraged me today. If it's still difficult right now, if you have questions for me afterward, you can come to me and ask. I love talking to people, and I would love to talk to you about some of those things as well. I also want to mention, we talked about some things today. Yes, there were tears shed in our classroom today because we actually named people and things that we've lost. And I want to mention, if you're struggling very much with this, please don't be silent about it. There are shepherds or elders here that their sole job is to actually help you with that. If you're more comfortable with Joey and you have a good relationship with Joey, then see if Joey has time to talk. Make a time with him to talk. Or if you want to talk to me, perfectly fine. Or if there's someone here you trust and can be helpful, talk to them about it. Have times to meet. Make appointments, schedule to pray together, because it's so helpful. So I hope that was encouraging to you this morning and helped you to grow stronger. In this lesson, we'll talk about anxiety. And the thing I love about these lessons is we can go to the life of Jesus. This is what I love about God. We can go to the life of Jesus, God in the flesh, and look and see how He handled Himself when He felt these emotions. Isn't that cool? Isn't it really cool that we can actually look at Him and say, if I'm feeling this emotion, if I'm in this situation, how did the perfect Son of God respond when He was in a body here on earth? How did He deal with it? So if you go to the book of Luke, it's really interesting here. The book of Luke talks about Jesus' agony and His anxiety, His distress. Luke chapter 12, verse 49 through 50. While you're going there, I want to talk about just anxiety just for a moment, what it is. Okay, it is a fear of a perceived threat in the future. I use that word perceived because a lot of times when we're anxious about something, there's nothing to be anxious about at all. There are people who have what's called phobias, where it is an irrational, elevated and extreme fear of something, where I can't even be in the same room as the thing. Now, it's not causing me physical harm. I'm just so terrified of this thing that it causes me to spin into a panic. So phobias, anxieties, it is a fear or a perceived threat. It's a fear of a perceived threat in the future. So we talk about that. We can immediately talk about some things that hit home maybe to a lot of us. You've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. That has to do with stress and anxiety. Stress is literally in the name of it. Post-traumatic stress. It's after trauma stress. So immediately when you think of that phrase, you probably think of veterans, because they were in an environment that was high stress and traumatic, which just means a wound. Trauma just means a wound. Even though they may have not ever gotten shot or wounded physically in battle or as they were serving, they can still come home being in a stressful emotional environment like that and suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. Why is that? God gave us a nervous system. He gave us a brain that is very powerful, that marks things that are very dangerous. And so if something very dangerous happens to you or you almost die, guess what your brain is going to do? Anything similar to that thing that scared me almost to death or almost killed me, we're going to have a significant response to the next time it happens or next time I think it's going to happen. Car accidents. If you've ever been in a car accident, maybe afterward, you were a little anxious getting back into a car. Why? Because last time you got into a car, you had an accident. For a veteran that comes home, the 4th of July is normally a very anxious time because the sounds of fireworks trigger an emotional response. That's not the only thing that can make us anxious. A lot of times we think, oh, that's a very anxious person and stressed person. You have to, in order to have post-traumatic stress or have an anxiety disorder or struggle with it, you have to go through something really bad. It's actually not the case. You can go through a series of small stressors over a long period of time, and it will make you into an anxious person if you don't have people around you who can support you and help you through those things. I want to give an example before we jump into the Bible. This is so important because later on in this lesson, we're going to talk about remedies for anxiety. And so I want you to imagine this. You know, one of the things that movies get right about therapy and about mental health is when, the therapist sits down and they have their notepad and they say, what was your childhood like? Tell me about your mom, your dad. Tell me about what was life like for you growing up? That's one of the things they get right. Here's why, is because those are your formal years. It is forming your nervous system and your brain. So if you grew up in an environment where almost every week you were yelled at and locked in a closet, it would make sense if you were claustrophobic or you were very violent when people raised their voice at you. Because at a time in your life where you were weak and you were small, people took advantage of you. Or what about if you saw mom and dad getting into fistfights every other day and you watched dad hurt your mom? How would that affect your view of men, either as a boy or a girl? How would that affect you? Men are dangerous. They're scary. People who are bigger than me are scary. And maybe I'm never getting married, or I'm only going to marry someone who is absolutely safe. And maybe you can never trust yourself with somebody. You'll see how this makes sense. It can start to make sense about how the things happen to you can really affect you. They don't have to control you, but they can affect you. Jesus felt anxiety. A lot of times we think about anxiety and we honor people who seem to be absolutely cool in every situation that they're in. They can just keep it all together. They never worry about anything. They're so relaxed, and that's the way I want to be. I want to be able to never worry about anything. Well, I want to break the news to you. Everybody worries about something. Everybody worries about something. I was told when I was in school, when I was sitting around with other people, I was told, Cole, you look like you don't worry about anything. And I immediately told them, well, you're wrong, because I'm anxious right now. Just talking to y'all, because I'm meeting new people. I'm anxious. We all worry about something. The question is, how do we handle that? How do we go about that? Well, Jesus in Luke 12, he had something to worry about, didn't he? He knew from even the very beginning that God the Father had a will for his life, and his life was going to be cut short by crucifixion by the Romans. So he was going to die in a very awful way, wasn't he? When Luke chapter 12, you go to verse 49, Jesus says, I came to cast fire on the earth, and with that it were already kindled. I have a baptism to be baptized with, and how great is my distress until it is accomplished. What does he say? Well, he says, I've got a baptism. And in some sense, he says, I've got an immersion. I'm going to be immersed into something. And he says, and my distress is very great until it's over with. In Matthew 20, he talks about a cup that he has to drink from. And he asked his disciples, are you able to drink of the same cup that I'm able to drink from? And it's interesting because normally in the Bible, when we see that word cup, it has to do with suffering and God's wrath being poured out on a nation of people or on somebody. So Jesus says, I'm going to be immersed in something, and there's a cup that I have to drink from. And it's not until we get to the Garden of Gethsemane that we really see what he's talking about with that cup. He says, Father, if it's your will, he says this the night before he's going to be crucified. He says, Father, if it's your will, let this cup pass from me. What's he saying? Saying, if there's any other way, Father, for us to save mankind from their sins, let's go that way. But if not, I'm going to do your will. I'm going to die. Was Jesus stressed and anxious about his death? Nod your head this way. He was. Go to Luke 22, that passage that I was just talking about, the Garden of Gethsemane. Luke 22. Some amazing things are said here by Jesus, and the description of his emotional state is very telling for us as well. In verses 39 through 46, it says, and he came out and went, as was his custom, to the Mount of Olives. And the disciples followed him. And when he came to the place, he said to them, pray that you may not enter into temptation. And he withdrew from them about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, saying, Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done. And there appeared to him an angel from heaven strengthening him. And being in agony, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like drops of blood falling down to the ground. And when he rose from prayer, he came to the disciples and found them sleeping for sorrow. Isn't that interesting? Was Jesus being crucified and whipped in the Garden of Gethsemane? Had that started yet? No. What is he doing? He's just on the ground praying. So is anybody inflicting any harm onto his body at that point? But what does the Bible say about Jesus' emotional state? He was in agony. He was hurting. He was feeling pain. We all know this to be true. You ever been so sorrowful or so anxious and scared that it actually hurt your body? Maybe you felt tension in your chest, a tightness, and then it turned into pain. Maybe you felt like you were having a heart attack and then you ended up having a panic attack. Or your throat started closing up. It was really hard to breathe. It felt like somebody was just tightening a collar around your throat, and it felt like there was a lump there, like you were choking on something. Or maybe you got headaches because the muscles going up the back of your neck and your head, they're just so tense, and they've been so tense for a long time, and you just get these headaches that just will not go away. Or maybe your stomach gets sick. You just can't keep anything down. And it is so embarrassing, or it's just so annoying. Or you just can't sleep. You lay down in bed, there's nothing to do, so your mind finds stuff to do, and you just can't go to sleep. You can't get comfortable. There's stuff you have to do, or there's stuff you're worried about happening. Isn't it interesting how we can feel pain, but then we look at our bodies and we're not bleeding. Nobody's cutting into us. Nobody's harming us physically. But here, notice, Jesus felt agony. And nobody was hurting his physical body. Because he knew, tomorrow morning, I'm going to be beaten. I'm going to be nailed to a cross. But on top of that, more than anything, I'm going to bear the punishment for everyone's sins so that they don't have to bear their own punishment. That's anxiety. That's stress. And Jesus felt it. He was sweating. That was another symptom. He was sweating. In Matthew 26, Jesus tells his disciples in verse 37 and 38, listen to what he tells his friends. He says, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Have you ever said something like that? Man, I am so sick right now. I feel like I'm going to die. I'm so stressed, or I'm so scared, or I'm so sad right now, I think I could die. It feels like my life is about to end. This is so powerful. Jesus felt that way. He felt that way. Even to death. So when we talk about anxiety, everybody feels it. Everybody feels it. You're not exempt from it. Everyone worries about something. Even the Son of God. Even the Son of God. And I want to point out something here. And it was not sinful for him to worry. It was not sinful. Do you feel guilty sometimes for having anxiety? I feel like I should trust more. I feel like I should be stronger. Why can't I just get my emotions into order? Why can't I just control it and just grow up? Have you had people tell you to grow up because of your anxiety? God gave us the ability to be anxious about stuff. You know why? Like fear, anxiety, it's protective. It's protective. I was worried about these lessons this morning, and you know what I did? I got up earlier than I normally do, and I read through the notes, and it helped. I was worried on the way here. My wife asked me, Anna, she said, "How you feeling?" I said, "A little anxious." Because it's been about 3 or 4 months since I've preached last, so I'm a little rusty. She said, "Okay." And I felt better because I'm actually being honest with myself. This is where I'm at, but I'm still going to do it. I love the phrase, I don't remember who said it, so this did not originate from me. But someone said, "It is impossible to be brave without fear." It's impossible to be brave without fear. If you're not afraid, there's no way that you can be brave. There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to overcome in that. So if you're anxious about death, we talked about death, good. That's not something that God wanted in this world anyway. It's not a fun thing. God doesn't want you to get excited about death. Man, I just can't wait to suffer and die. That's not based in reality. But he does want you to be able to have hope, to be able to look at it in a healthy way and say, I can, yes, dread death, but also say, that's not the end of me. And I can trust Jesus through it. So let's look, with the time we have remaining, let's look and see, what does Jesus do with his anxiety? When he feels this stuff, what does he do? Well, the first thing I hope that you can see that he did was he told his friends. In Matthew 26, what did he say? He said, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death." Let's talk to men real quick. Grown men. When is the last time you were that vulnerable with your friends? Maybe your spouse? Maybe your parents? Family? When was the last time you admitted, "Y'all, I'm really worried about this. Can y'all pray for me?" Or saying, I don't feel like I have it all together right now. When's the last time you did that? How do you feel about doing that, by the way? Here's the cool thing about emotions. We can have feelings about emotions. Let me explain. People will cry, right? If, let's say, you're in a conversation with somebody and they start crying, what do people normally immediately, automatically say right when they start crying? "I'm sorry." What are they feeling there? They're feeling guilt. They're feeling guilt for having sadness. Imagine a world where people felt guilty for having sadness. Well, you live in it because that's taught. Don't cry. That's weird. That's weakness. You don't need to do that. That brings down the mood of the room. You're just not in control when you're crying, which is not true. You're just feeling a natural feeling. Jesus cried in the garden. He was in agony. Actually, Hebrews chapter 5, verses 7 and 8 says that Jesus, when he was in agony in the garden, He was crying out loudly with tears. Do you think his disciples heard him? Yes. He wasn't very far away from them. He was like a stone's cast away from them. So however you can throw a stone, however far, that's how far he was. And he was yelling, crying, and sweating in the garden. But notice the vulnerability of Jesus, the Son of God, the one who was there at the creation, the one who created the world, the one who created you and me, and has the power to calm the storms on the sea, and the sea obeys him. That man cried, and he admitted to being anxious. I'm anxious. Please pray. This isn't just a man problem. This is also a problem that women have too. A lot of women are told to not be so emotional. You've probably heard that before. Guess what? Men and women are basically the same amount of emotions. It's just that we express them differently. Men are normally going to do it by anger. Women can do it normally by crying or sadness. So we're normally kind of the same as far as the emotions we feel. Here's the point I'm trying to make. How do I respond when I'm feeling very anxious or when I feel just a moderate amount of anxiety? Do I hold it in and say, I just got to get through this? Nobody can know either, because if they do know, then they're going to know that I'm a weak person. Or I just don't want to be a burden to anybody, so I'm not ever going to bring it up. Is that the way we think? Or are we willing to actually hit it head on and say, you know what, I want to talk through this and overcome this now, rather than just holding it for the rest of my life all by myself and it never being fixed? You don't get over anxiety. That's actually avoidance. You have to get through it. So it's like a tunnel, like a long tunnel through a mountain. It will be dark, but that's the fastest way through the mountain. Who wants to climb over it and then go all the way back down on the other side? It's a straight line. Jesus was willing to say to his disciples, hey, I'm not doing well. I need you to watch for me and pray. And he took time to be with them. He also took time to pray himself. Isn't that interesting? How often do we pray just in general? Cole, I pray once a week. That's good. Well, Cole, I can't remember exactly the last time I was intentional about praying to God and talking to him. Cole, I pray every day. Here's what I want to tell y'all this morning. I don't care how much you pray right now, but I do want y'all to know this. If you want to get through anxiety and to invite the God of the universe to help you with it, you should pray every time you're anxious. A lot of times we get to a point where we're so overwhelmed by stuff and we've taken on all these tasks and we haven't said no to people that have maybe asked us to do certain things when we know we should say no because we don't have the time, or we're overwhelmed and tired from work, or we've had these difficult relationships that haven't been resolved yet, and we just get so overwhelmed, and it's only at the bottom of the abyss where we finally say, you know what, I'm going to ask God for help. You know what that's like? That's like being out in a boat all by yourself, and then there's a hole in the bottom of the boat, and then water starts to just fill the boat, and you see maybe a gallon come in, 2 gallons, then 10, and you just keep going until it's all the way up to your waist. You're just sitting there in the boat. It's all the way up to your waist, and then you say, you know what? I may need to ask for help. I may need to handle this whole situation in this boat. That's what it's like. God, think about his perspective when he looks down at us and we're struggling. What does he see? He sees people trying to trust in themselves to fix their own problems rather than go to the Father that loves them and can fix it with them. People have kids in this room. Can it be frustrating for you to watch your kids struggle with something for several minutes or a long time or even longer? and you're just kind of sitting there saying, hey, buddy, do you want some help with that? No, I've got it. And they're obviously probably not going to get it unless you just give them a little bit of information to help them. You're not going to do it for them, but you don't want to stand just idly by. And it wastes so much time. When you could be right next to them growing them and helping them through some of the difficult things in their life. It's probably how God feels. When he looks at us and he says, I could have helped them days ago, years ago, and yet they still do not invite me to help. One of the most powerful verses in the Bible is where Jesus talks about praying to the Father, and he says, ask God. Whatever you ask. If you ask and you seek, you'll find it. He says, ask God for help because he already knows what you need even before you ask. He knows what you need. But he's waiting for you to ask. So, when do we ask? Is the question. I was listening to a podcast, and then I bought a book that was based on what that interview was on. It was about weakness. And something beautiful was said in the book. It says, Christian maturity actually isn't becoming aware that you don't need God as much. I think a lot of us think that way is, the more mature I get as a Christian, the more I don't need God because I can do it on my own. That's kind of the way we think about it in earthly terms, is we get training for something, we go to school, and then we are supervised by somebody, and then we're able to do it on our own. Then we can teach somebody else. That's kind of how we think. But actually, Christian maturity is recognizing I actually need God more than I thought before. Because I'm absolutely useless by myself. Jesus said, he was talking about the vine and the branches. He says, I'm the vine, you are the branches. He says, apart from me, you can do nothing. You can't do anything without me. And that's how I want you to think as Christians. Jesus says, I want you to think, I can't do what I need to do today unless God has blessed me and been with me. And his presence is with me, strengthening me. So when we talk about anxiety, please don't think, man, I want to get to a point where I just don't have to pray as much. That's backwards. God wants you to recognize your weakness and your dependency on him so that you lean into him more and ask for more help. And then the last thing. I think this is probably the most powerful thing for me. If you go to Luke 22, go back to that gospel account. Did y'all notice that God provided an angel to Jesus when he was praying in the garden? Luke 22, verse 43 says, and there appeared to him, to Jesus, an angel from heaven strengthening him. That's interesting to me. Because at the beginning of his ministry, when he was in the wilderness, the Bible also says that after his time of temptation was over with, when Satan came to him to tempt him with the bread, and he put him on the pinnacle of the temple and said, throw yourself down. God's not going to let you die. And then he takes him to the high mountain and says, if you bow down and worship me, I'll give you all this stuff, which is actually God's. It's not actually Satan's, it's God's. So he already has it. But after all that was over with, the 40 days was ended, and his fasting was ended. There appeared to him angels ministering to him. That's Jesus. So here's the profound thing to me. Jesus prays to God, if there's any other way, let this cup pass from me. If there's any other way to save humanity, let's do that. But if not, I'll do your will. And God says, no, there's not. There's not another way. God has to die for the sins of the world. No one else can do it. There's not another way. Somebody has to be punished for the sins that the world has committed. But number two, God strengthened him. He strengthened him to do it. Isn't that amazing? A lot of us think, I would like to reduce my anxiety in the world. I like to reduce the amount of worrying that I do, which is a noble thing. You know, if we have the ability to take some of our anxieties down, or especially setting boundaries in our life, saying no to things that we don't need to be doing, and spending more time doing more valuable things, that's a way to reduce anxiety. To find support and help, that's good too. But here's the point. You're always going to be anxious. Life is always going to be difficult. And it may even get more and more difficult as you go. Well, Cole, this sounds very depressing. Yes. Until we recognize that God provides strength through the journey. So next time you pray to God, God, help me with my anxiety. Don't ask God to reduce the responsibilities maybe in your life, or the stress in your life, or the anxiety. Don't ask that as much as asking, God, give me the strength to walk through this part of my life. I'll be vulnerable with y'all real quick. Just tell y'all that there were times in my life that were very dark for me, really dark. I struggled a lot with anxiety, still do, but I'm doing a lot better. And it's not because me. It's not because that I've just found I've found the secret formula to it. I just know who Jesus is. I have a relationship with Jesus, with the God of the universe who gives strength. And so in these dark times in my life, a lot of them were later in my teenage years, there was a lot of prayer that I did during that time. And I'll tell you this, looking back and studying about Jesus, I would like to think that during those times, God supplied me with an angel. Now, I know that may not sound, normal to what you've heard before. I can't prove that there was one. I can't prove that there wasn't. I do know that God supplied one for his son, Jesus. I don't know why he wouldn't supply one for me. I want to point this out. I'm still anxious today. There's more and more stuff that I worry about today than when I worried about then. It just doesn't change very much. As you go through life, there's just new stuff that comes up. Here's the point. God is able to give you strength for anything that you're going to face. What it takes is a heart that's willing to ask and go to him when you need help. And that is every day that you need help, every hour, every second. There's a song, maybe some of you have heard it. It's very beautiful. Near my God to thee. But I know y'all probably know that song. But BYU, the university, their choir did kind of a rendition, of that song. And they also had backup singers. The choir was singing in Latin in the song, and it's beautiful. Now, first time I heard it, didn't understand it at all. And so, curious as I am, I looked it up, what the translation would be for the first few words that they said. In the Latin, it's in articulo mortis caelitus mihi res. Translation is this: at the moment of death, my strength is from heaven. How beautiful. How awesome is that? One of the first songs, or one of the first words in this song is, at the moment of death, the worst part of my life, my strength is going to come from heaven. It's not going to come from anywhere else. It's not going to come from me because I read so many books, because I work out, because I have so many friends, because my bank account has this number next to it. Not because I go to church every single Sunday. No. It's because I know who God is, and I know where my strength comes from. It's him. You can go to church all you want. You can read every book of the Bible. You can do all the good deeds. But if your trust is not in the Lord, he can't help you. Because he helps people that trust him. that humble themselves and say, I need help. Today, it's the same for being saved, isn't it? If someone doesn't say, I need to be saved, someone doesn't say, I've sinned against God, I'm evil, I've done wrong, and I deserve to be punished. If someone's not willing to humble themselves to that point, can they be saved? No, they can't. Because their attitude is not proper before the Creator. They can't receive grace. Today, if you struggle with worry and anxiety, I want to tell you this. Therapy helps. I've done it myself as a client, and I've done it as a therapist. It helps people, especially if you have a very good therapist. I want to point that out. Same way you'd go to the doctor for your heart, you have a brain that controls every process in your body. Why would we neglect that if it's malfunctioning, if there's something going on? I want to point that out. But also, number two, having friends and family and support are so helpful. And being vulnerable and honest helps with these emotions. You can't do it alone. God hates it when you do it alone. So this morning, if you need help, if you want prayers, if you have something that's in your life right now that you're worried about, I want to invite you to be able to pray about that with us today. But if you want to become a Christian, being immersed in water for the forgiveness of your sins because you placed your faith in Jesus, let's do that today if you haven't. Let's get that done today because that is the greatest decision you'll ever make, and it reduces anxiety. So I want to point out, if you want to become a Christian, we're ready to do that today. God is ready. So if you want to, you can come forward as we stand and sing.
Sweet